Welcome to a brand new episode of Power Moves Young Leaders Network Edition. On this episode, I chat with Vincent Baart of Remax Camosun, and we spoke about several different categories in this conversation. The first was leadership, and the idea that leadership today looks a little different than it has in the past. So Vincent shares his thoughts on that, and also how young agents can get past that imposter syndrome and jump into leadership roles at a young age. We then talk about systems and goal planning and keeping yourself accountable to hitting those goals. And then I share a story about Vincent later on in the conversation where he blew everyone's minds at the last Young Leaders Network event when he shared how he was using AI. So he breaks down a couple tips and ways that you can leverage AI technology. He also talks about building and keeping great relationships with clients. There was a ton of value jam-packed into this 20-some minute conversation. I hope you enjoy. From Remax, this is Power Moves YLN Edition, where we go in depth with some of the best young Remax agents and brokers to find out what it takes to be a top producing real estate agent and the moves that took their careers to new heights. My name is Wade Paterson. I'm an executive director with Remax Canada, and I'm your host for this audio experience. And on this episode, I'm joined by Vincent Baart, an agent and team leader with Remax Camosun in Victoria, BC. With 6 years of experience in the industry, Vincent has built a thriving real estate business focused on smart systems, strategic growth, and long-term client relationships. Beyond transactions, Vincent is passionate about helping young agents scale their business, leverage technology for efficiency, and develop leadership skills early in their careers. Vincent, welcome to Power Moves YLN Edition.
Thanks, Wade. It's really good to be here.
Excited to have you on. And I know you do some podcasting as well with the Victoria Real Estate Podcast. So what is your preference here? Do you prefer being host of podcast or being the guest on a podcast?
You know, Wade, I always feel like even in our show, I'm almost the peanut gallery. So I'm always the one interjecting. I've got maybe a question here and there, but I typically don't like to be the monologuer. So I'm happy to let you ask all the questions and I'll try to be as concise as I can.
Sounds good. Well, let's start at the beginning of how you got into real estate in the first place. Because my understanding is your background was in the building trades. You owned a house painting company. So was real estate agent always kind of in the background or something you were thinking about, or what officially led to that?
Yeah, real estate was always in the back of my mind as somewhere I was hoping to end up, not from a sales perspective, but more from an investing perspective. I have been fascinated ever since I think I was 19 and I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And that really changed the way I looked at career and taking ownership of my own career. House schlepping, the act of actually selling real estate, was not on my agenda. It was not where I wanted to be, in the sense that I thought it was something that people only did once they had gray hair. So I thought if I ever do get around to getting my real estate license, that'll be maybe on my fifth or sixth career, not early on in my mid 20s.
So what changed for you then?
Well, it all comes down to network. And I had some wonderful painting clients and they were realtors. They had a small team at Remax in Victoria, and they had me quoting and bidding and project managing some painting projects for their clients, you know, listing preparation, that sort of thing. And after working on a couple of different projects together, they sat me down and they said, Vince, we like the way that you managed our projects. We like the way that you sold us. Because candidly, I had actually lost a bid to them. And the way I had followed up and tried to win that business back, they said, this isn't the typical way that a contractor does things. They kind of just move on. And so they said, Vince, we think that you'd probably be a good fit for house selling. And I said, well, just like I said to you, Wade, I don't have enough gray hair. I'm way too young. And they said, well, you can borrow some of ours. So what that looked like was they had me join their team as the junior agent. And both of them were, you know, they were a couple years away from the exit. They had been in business for over 25 years and had a thriving referral based, you know, really strong network type business, but they wanted to go golfing more. And they said, hey, we need a young guy to do the buying trips and that sort of thing. So that's how I got my start.
It's such a good entry point in having kind of that mentorship piece and being able to feed off of somebody else's business that has already been established. You know, Vince, we're talking a little bit about this episode and what we were going to talk about. One of the themes you brought up was leadership. And you had a comment which really caught my attention, and that was that leadership today is different than what it was in the past. So the first question is, what does leadership look like today, and how is that different than what it was previously?
Well, if I think about the general malaise, this sort of conflict between millennials and boomers, or now it's Gen Z and boomers, there's a different way that work is done. There's a different way that management happens. And it used to be there was this kind of top down, hey, it's my way or the highway. And that still works to some extent with some of the legacy organizations that are out there. But personally, my style of leadership is a lot more collaborative, and it's about as close to consensus based decision making as you can possibly get. So it really is a democratic process rather than this is my vision, follow the vision or get out of the way. That's not been my style at all.
So how do you enable that? Like, what does that actually tangibly look like to have consensus based?
To me, it starts with being curious. So asking a lot of questions, asking questions from the team. Even the way I pitch an idea to the team and the people I work with, it's, hey, I'm thinking of doing this. What do you guys think about that? Have you ever come across this type of situation? And this is the direction I'm thinking we should be headed, but do you have any concerns about that? It's not to say that we have to all agree. Sometimes we drag one of our team members kicking and screaming, but typically we go by majority rules. And that seems to be a really good way to have the right decision making around us. And it allows us to, I think, have more fun. We're a lot more collaborative. I would say collaboration is the key to that.
So for those agents who are coming into the business who maybe have a level of imposter syndrome early on, how can they get into some leadership roles, leadership positions? How is that something that you've been able to do?
Well, it's kind of looked to me like just saying yes to a lot of things. So I've volunteered on our general advertising committee or GA committee locally. I've been a part of a lot of these kinds of things. Anytime there's someone, says, "Hey, put your hand up if you're looking to volunteer," my hand's kind of perpetually up, and I'm just happy to jump in and fill whatever roles. As you sit on a GA, for example, and you get to learn how things work, how the advertising sausage is made, for lack of a better word, locally from the power of the Remax brand, you get to now have a voice. Now people come to you and they say, "Hey, this is what's going on in the community. What do you think about that?" And it turns into a conversation. It turns into a mutual curiosity. So really, it's that classic start with sweeping the floors and you might end up owning the building. I'm definitely not owning the building, but I'm definitely having a lot of conversations and collaborating with people that I'm really excited to be learning from.
And then in terms of that, like the being involved with GA, because I don't know if a lot of people completely understand what goes into that, but is there anything that surprised you with being part of making some of those marketing decisions, or just in general about the power of the Remax brand?
Absolutely. This is something that I was not expecting when I joined Remax and when I joined organized real estate. But I realized it's death by a thousand little fees. And anyone who's out there who's a realtor, they know you get your commission statement and it's 1,000 little fees, 1% here, 3% there. And you just wonder, where is all my money going? I can say with absolute confidence that a lot of your money does stay locally, and it's a really cool tool. Rather than having the good folks in Toronto or Denver dictating where our advertising dollars get spent in our local market, they say, "Hey, it's your money. We're going to give it right back to you, and you guys decide where to spend it." So we're able to be a lot more agile with our decision-making process, and we're able to go after the types of sponsorships and events that are going to get the most local eyeballs on our brand. So it's been a really surprising twist. I always thought of Remax as a very corporate structure. It is, however, there is a lot of flexibility through the GA.
And then continuing down the theme of leadership, what are some lessons you've learned as a team leader that perhaps you wish you had known day one of starting that process?
Direction is less important than speed. And I have been told my entire life, be patient. It will come. Things will happen. And for the first 3, 4 years of being a realtor, and I went through COVID during those times as well. So everyone was uncertain and it was weird, but I had such a rush. And the thing that keeps coming back to me is it's actually not a sprint. Our goal isn't to be number one this year. Our goal is to have a business that lasts. And so for me, when I think of leadership, when I think of what it looks like to build a team that is all pulling in the same direction, be patient. Don't try to fit anyone you can onto your team, or don't try to pull anyone into the boat and have everyone pulling in different directions. Wait and be patient for the right people to show up. And when you can do that, when you can craft a vision and have the right people there that are going to all pull in the same direction, from my perspective, it makes the ride a lot more fun, but you'll end up moving a lot faster. But it doesn't happen all at once. It really does take patience. And I know we're listening to the YLN edition. Everyone listening to this is probably under 40 and they're saying, yeah. But like, what's the shortcut? I'm 6 years in. I'm still looking for that shortcut. I still sign up for webinars. I still sign up for all kinds of resources. I have not found a shortcut. So all in all, direction is more important than velocity or speed.
Another form of leadership is thought leadership. And I mentioned earlier the Victoria Real Estate podcast. You've put out quite a few episodes through this. I'm curious, what have you learned from podcasting and how has it impacted your business?
Well, what have I learned from podcasting? I would say what I've learned from podcasting is that there's actually a very low barrier to entry to sharing your opinions. everyone has opinions, and we have 1,600 realtors in the Victoria Real Estate Board. All of them have opinions about the market. What podcasting has taught me is that if you're able to leverage a little bit of technology, a little bit of structure, a little bit of discipline to keep pushing these episodes out, you're going to get to a point where you do end up saying, oh yeah, I actually do have a voice that's a little bit louder than the one-to-one conversations that I used to have. So it's, in my mind, it's using technology to amplify your existing message that you were already going to share. The things I'm sharing with you, Wade, I would share if we were just one-on-one having a coffee. But by using podcasting, by using these technologies, it just allows us to stand on a slightly taller soapbox and we're just a little bit louder without yelling.
That's right. So let's talk a little bit about building a scalable real estate business. So what systems and processes helped you scale your business?
I have a lot. I have spreadsheets on spreadsheets. It's kind of nauseating sometimes. If I was to point to one tool that moved my business forward, we call it a roadmap. So every year we have a roadmap, and think of it like you have a spreadsheet with 12 columns, and each column is a month. And then each row down the side is a different thing that you'd like to do every month. So for example, on our roadmap, our goal is to record 2 podcasts every month, send out 1 newsletter, send out 1 prize draw, so on and so forth. I remember before I had this tool, I would think every month, oh, it's a new month or new quarter, new year. I'm going to do all these events. It's going to be wonderful. This is the year that I finally start doing video. It never happened. And it would be overwhelming and depressing all at the same time. By taking a step back, kind of slowing down and saying, what do I want to accomplish in this whole year? And breaking it down into monthly goals, that has really allowed me to create a stronger marketing piece. And that in turn, speaking about using technology to leverage your voice, we send out prize draws, just as an example. We send out coffee cards constantly. That allows us to multiply our voice way more than if I was just going for one-on-one coffees with individuals, although I'm still happy to do that and I love a good cup of joe. But the one tool is that roadmap tool, which allows you to look at the whole year. And again, it's back to that theme of marathon, not a sprint. I'm not trying to do 1,000 things today, Wade. I'm trying to do 100 things well over the next 12 months. So that's like 2 or 3 things a week. I can handle that.
And then when it comes to accountability, right? So you've got that plan for each month. How often are you kind of checking in and reviewing how well you're doing. And then the other question to this is, let's say January, the goal was to do all sorts of different tasks, but maybe you only did one podcast instead of two. Does that mean you're doing 3 in February, or is that just a clean slate the next month?
It's a clean slate. Just like your sales targets for a year or a quarter, it's a clean slate. No amount of you busting your butt in 2025 is going to make up for a pathetic sales year in 23 or 24. It just doesn't work like that. So what we do is we reset, and we have actually weekly meetings as a team. So this comes from, there's a book by Gino Wickman called Traction. And if you're interested in systems and running businesses in general, forget real estate for a sec. Traction is the book that has allowed me to apply a little bit more of a longer term thinking perspective to my business. And a huge part of that is having one standing weekly meeting as a team. And every week we have our weekly scorecard metrics. How many calls did you make? How many offers did you write? These are the kind of weekly cadence things, but also how are we doing for our roadmap for the year? We've had our second week for March. Have we scheduled all of our podcasts for this month? And so that's 4 meetings every month for us to come back to the roadmap and say, are we on track for this month for the roadmap?
One of my favorite things at our last YLN event, which was in Victoria last May, was that we had an open forum on day 2, and you took the mic and you said, "Hey, everyone, just want to share how I'm using ChatGPT." And we had a printed version of everyone's contact information. So all the attendees with emails and that sort of information, but it wasn't digitized. It was a paper copy. And you're like, "Yeah, no problem. I took a photo of this, uploaded the photo to ChatGPT, built the spreadsheet. I've sent it to my assistant, I think, at the time. And you will all be getting an email at 12:05. The event ends at 12 with my introduction." And like, especially then, because I feel like people have evolved really quickly with how they're using Chat GPT. But at that point, like, people's minds were blown that you had used it in this way. And I'm curious, speaking of AI, like, how else have you leveraged AI in your business?
I mean, that is a perfect example, because we used to all come home with a box full of business cards, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'll add that person on LinkedIn eventually, and I still have a box of business cards. Some of the other ways that I've been able to leverage AI would definitely be around the podcast. So we have a tool that we use called Opus Clips, and it's remarkably affordable. You take a video, for example, a long form video like what we're doing today. This will be, 30, 40, 50 minute. I don't know how long these things go, but it'll be a long form video. We take that video, we upload it to Opus Clips, and using AI, it looks at the entire video and it breaks out 20 or 30 small video vignettes. And it will say, hey, that moment that Wade said that one thing, the AI thinks that that's going to really hit on LinkedIn. So it'll take that 20-second clip, it'll add captions to the clip, and it allows you to underthink things. AI is really wonderful for underthinking things. And so Opus Clips is one of those tools that we use. It takes all of these little clips, sends it all out onto LinkedIn for you. And so you're not there being like, oh, I don't like the way I sounded. Oh, I stuttered. Oh, my skin's a little too red. You're not thinking about that. Opus Clips just does it for you. So that would be one tool that, from an AI perspective, that has been really helpful for the business.
I want to kind of stick on this digital idea, because we've talked a little bit about the podcast, just talking about Opus Clips. How do you really leverage social media, and what are you using it for? Because I think that some people get in a little bit of a trap of, they maybe don't pay any attention, don't spend nearly enough time, and completely ignore these platforms, or perhaps spend too much time and then it gets in the way of them actually building their business. So what's your approach when it comes to social media?
Candidly, Wade, I'm in the camp that does not have Instagram or Facebook on my phone. I have seen in the first couple of years when I had that, that guilt, I need to be doing all these things. I'd be posting, a dumb selfie of me at an open house, and I'd look at the interactions I was getting with social media, and it was all realtors. Well,
Hmm.
I don't, I mean, I like realtors. Some of my best friends are realtors, but I don't need them to know I'm at an open house. I need my clients. I need my friends. And so I personally found that social media was a really ineffective tool for me in building my personal brand. by using tools like Opus Clips, or there's another great one. It's a locally owned company called Meet Edgar, and it's a programming tool that allows you to take all of this content. You could, for example, I write a blog, right? Very 1999 of me. I still blog every month, and I can use Meet Edgar to pull the RSS feed from my blog and automatically publish it to Facebook and Instagram. Now, I'm using it as a soapbox, but the challenge with social media is I should also be able to listen. So if someone sends me a message and it takes me 52 weeks to get back to you, that's not ideal. So I don't have it all figured out. But even on our podcast, when I'm, doing the sign off, I'm saying, don't look for me on Instagram, just email me. And so if you can use these tools to be leveraging social media platforms and then don't go on them, just have people say, hey, send me an email. I will buy you coffee. I will send you a coffee card if you send me an email. Something to pull people out of social media, because going through your DMs to find business, it does work for a lot of people, and it works for, honestly, a lot of the under 40 crowd. I'm not that guy. I just can't do it.
That's fair. And I love these kind of candid conversations about it, right? Because social media, it's one of those things where sure, it can be really helpful, but also it is a risk of like really just being kind of a waste of time. And so no matter what you're doing, that's the cool thing about real estate is there are thousands of ways you can be that you can do a really good job. You can be successful in this industry, but not everyone's going to do things exactly the same way. So I want to go further then on the client relationship piece, because you had mentioned these coffee cards. Like,
Yeah,
what else are you doing to really stay connected with your clients?
a lot of coffee. I drink a lot of coffee.
How many cups a day are we talking?
Well, okay, maybe I don't know, 3 or 4.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not totally wild, but I really try as much as I can to do face to face. One of the things that I learned from the pandemic was that you actually don't have to go for a meal or go for a beer with someone to have a good connection. So right next to our office, we have a bog. It's like a nature reserve, maybe a 3-kilometer, 4-kilometer loop. And so I'll tell people, hey, you want to hang out with me? Let's go for a bog walk. And so I go for bog walks with people all the time. And we're just out there in the fresh air, getting mud on our shoes and just getting to meet sort of face to face. So I think that's one of the effective ways. The other one is, texting. That's a huge tool that I think you think about how crowded email is, how crowded everyone's email inboxes are. Now we have these AI tools to kind of simplify and essentially delete all the realtor updates that we send out. Our system on our team, we send out about 14 or 15,000 emails every month through all of the different nudges and drips and whatnots. Texting, those filters aren't as sophisticated. So personally, I'm in the Mac ecosystem. And so I'll use iMessage on my laptop. So I can just bang out, I can have 20 conversations on the go. It's like when I was in middle school on, do you remember Neopets? Or
Yes.
like
Yes, I do.
AOL, MSN Online, those types of things. So it's just like I'm back in grade 6 in a chat room, but I'm able to have all of these conversations really quickly on my laptop. So I have found that also really helps. Voice notes, those are a really cool way to just kind of stand out. I've seen other agents do video messages. On a friend-to-friend perspective, I prefer voice notes, but if I'm following up with, for example, a listing presentation I did, I'll often do like a screen capture video, and that seems to be pretty effective. But that's not client related. That's more like prospect related. That's more like the hard prospecting that we do.
Well, what I appreciate about you, Vince, is you're somebody of action. It's funny, like as we're talking about these different things, I can think of several examples of like, oh yeah, I've had that interaction with Vince. For example, you mentioned before asking a lot of questions. And again, going back to YLN, there was a presentation I gave, and then you asked me a really good question. I think I was talking about the fact that consumers see Remax as a modern brand, and you said, well, why is that important? And I'm like, it seems like it just should be obvious that that's a clear thing, but it made me really think through and then impacted me positively on future presentations. So I love that you take action. One thing I want to go back to as well is you talked about a book that had an impact for you was the book Traction. And I'm just curious, like, how do you approach that self growth? Like, are you a big book guy? Are you listening to a lot of podcasts? Do you have a morning routine? Like, how do you ensure that you're growing as a business professional?
Um, I don't know if you've ever seen Ryan Serhant on $1 Million Listing, big, shiny New York realtor. Um, you can roll your eyes at a lot of what he says, but he has this saying, expansion always in all ways. And to me, what that looks like is if you can be getting as much reading as you can, podcasting, getting mentors, getting advice, getting coaches, keep asking those questions and being curious. My personal tool that I use for consuming a lot of information is definitely podcasts and Audible, because I drive a lot. And so when I'm in my car, I can be listening to Audible and consume a lot of content that way. But I also ask people that are 10 years ahead of me or 5 years ahead of me, what's the book that they would recommend? It's really easy to ask the wrong people for advice. So you really want to be careful what books you're getting recommendations from, and what people. But if you see someone who's 5 or 10 years ahead of you in the business and you say, I kind of want to do a little bit of what that guy's doing or that gal's doing, ask their brain, hey, what's a book that you read that changed your career? And Audible is, I think, the cheat code where you're just able to consume so much faster than you would if you're sitting down and reading for 10 minutes a day. I personally have the craziest squirrel brain, undiagnosed. I don't think that's a medical term, but I just 10 minutes is kind of the most I can focus on things if I'm reading. But if I'm listening in the car and I'm driving, I'll go for hours.
This has been a great conversation. So much great advice shared from your side. We like to end every episode of Power Moves YLN Edition with the question of, what is your power move when it comes to real estate? What is something that sets you apart in this business?
Wade, I've really struggled with that question. That's a tough one. It's always, what's your unique selling proposition? But if I was to say there's one thing that makes me stand out, is that I'm really curious. I'm curious about people's lives. I'm curious about their tools, their technology. I'm curious about their business. In my client's case, I'm curious about what's going on for them and what's important to them. So curiosity, I would say, is my one power move. I know it's kind of hokey, but just ask questions, be curious, and be interested.
I think that's great advice to end on. Vince, thank you so much for sitting down and joining me on this episode of Power Moves YLN Edition.
Thanks for having me.